Hello folks, and welcome to another edition of the Dr. Mark Foster Show. Today is August 18th of 2013, and I am back at work. This past week was just a series of meetings, so-called professional development days. Classes begin on Monday, tomorrow, and I have my syllabi all ready, and hopefully the students will be prepared as well. Today I wanted to address the subject of the Bhakti-Ṣūfī Movement, and in particular the place of Ḥaḍrat Sulṭān Bāhū in that movement. In previous programs, I have discussed how subjectively I consider Ḥaḍrat Sulṭān Bāhū to be my personal guardian angel, and I will cover that a bit today too, but from a somewhat different angle than I have in the past, mostly based on some insights I had during a meditation yesterday afternoon. To begin, Sufism, or in Arabic tasawwuf, was around before Muslims first entered the Indus Valley, or the Indian subcontinent, now called commonly South Asia. But after entering into the Indus Valley, there was a cross-fertilization between the indigenous Hindu population, in particular the Bhakti or devotional movement in India, and the Ṣūfīs. And although they came from somewhat different places, they found much common ground. Both Sufism and the Bhakti movement were, in a sense, popular movements. They were both opposed, to a degree, to the respective religious orthodoxies in their traditions. And so when they met each other, they shared very similar experiences as being from the less dominant social classes in their societies. And consequently, there was a lot of intermingling between those two movements. Many Sufis adopted many Bhakti ideas, and many devotional or Bhakti Hindus adopted many Sufi ideas as well. So the Bhakti-Ṣūfī movement was perhaps one of the most significant and important ones in India. Traditionally, India was dominated by Vedanta and by the Brahmins, who were served best by the Vedantic ritualistic system. Vedanta, in its various forms, had a very elaborate and nuanced approach to almost everything. It was very ritualistic. It supported the existence of the caste system, the rigid system of stratifying people into varnas, or social classes, or castes, basically occupational castes. And obviously the poor people in India were not being very well served by that. And so the Bhakti movement was a kind of popular, almost insurgency against the domination or hegemony or oppression that was imposed upon them by people from the higher social castes, like the Brahmins, the priestly caste in India. Similarly, the Sufis came from that kind of non-clerical type background, in a sense. Oftentimes, their views were at odds with those of the more traditional Muslim scholars. They presented a very popular approach to mysticism, one which was very frequently infused with a great deal of emotion, again, much like the Bhakti movement. An example of the Bhakti movement is the movement that was started by Lord Chaitanya. Chaitanya is best known because of his association with the modern movement, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness, or ISKCON for short, commonly known as the Hare Krishna movement, looked at Chaitanya as being an avatar and as being the founder of their movement. What ISKCON has done, however, is they have taken the writings of Chaitanya, as well as the Vedas in general, and they have interpreted them rather literally. So although there is a great deal of devotion in ISKCON, people chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. They call that the Maha mantra. Maha meaning great, the great mantra. And I have known over the years many people who were in that movement, and they were very, very devotional and very devoted. Some were more dogmatic than others. Some were more interested in ISKCON as a type of popular mysticism. After the death of the founder of ISKCON, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the movement factionalized, and now there are a lot of independent movements which, although connected with Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, and therefore indirectly with Chaitanya, have no formal relationship with the ISKCON organization. So that is on the Bhakti side. On the Islamic side, the Muslim side, you had people like Ḥaḍrat Sulṭān Bāhū, a Punjabi, very, very devotional. His entire approach to his relationship with God, with Allah, was one of deep and passionate love. Bāhū was anti-clerical. When he died, he refused to appoint a successor. Instead, he would say, "Turn to my writings. That's all you need. You don't need to follow a human being." So he refused to establish a line of successorship, which was very different from the way in which many other Sufis up till that time and even to the present time generally operate, with a very elaborate silsila or chain that goes from the founder of the order, really ultimately back to usually either Muhammad or the Imam Ali, and then to the present sheikh, at least traditionally. Oftentimes there are a lot of breaks along the way, but traditionally they go back either to Muhammad or to the Imam Ali. But in the case of Sultan Bāhū, he was a free spirit. He was a very passionate speaker, apparently, a very eloquent lecturer, very charismatic, attracted a very wide following. from people of all segments of society, but especially the poor. So he was a very good example, perhaps one of the most stellar examples of the Bhakti-Ṣūfī movement in the Indian subcontinent area. Similarly, Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism. Guru Nanak took elements of Sufism, especially from the Sufi Kabir, and elements of the Bhakti movement, and refined them into a new religion, the religion of Sikhism. Today there are several different movements that go by that name of Sikhism. Some have slightly different lines of succession. At least one has a continuing Sikh guru to this day. Most mainstream Sikhs say that the guruship ended, and now their guru is their holy book, the Adi Granth Sahib. But there are again some Sikhs who claim to follow a living guru. Similarly, there is a neo-Sikh group known as Surat Shabd Yoga, originally Radha Swami Satsang, and still some of the branches of that movement use that name. And Surat Shabd Yoga, or Radha Swami Satsang, was started back in the middle part of the 19th century by a fellow named Shiv Dayal, although he is devotionally referred to as a saint and regarded as being a saint, and they view him, generally speaking, as being the founder, Swamiji, they sometimes call him, of the Surat Shabd Yoga movement. And there is considerable variety in that movement. Some members chant inwardly a series of 5 words, the names of the 5 lords of the worlds. Others chant 3 words, and still others chant 1 word, either Radha Swami in the case of some, or in the case of others, they chant Hu. Especially the more Americanized branches generally chant Hu, which is the Arabic word for He, as in Hu Allah, He is God, showing the Islamic influence on Sikhism. So, more particularly, focus now on Sultan Bāhū. Since Sultan Bāhū was connected so closely with the Sufi Bhakti or Bhakti-Ṣūfī movement, I've looked back on my own life and the fact that throughout my life I've had a kind of dual interest in both more Hindu or Dharmic type religions, especially Hinduism and Sikhism, as well as Surat Shabd Yoga, and then on the other hand more Islamic and Sufi movements, including my own religion, the Baha'i faith, which, although not Islamic, certainly comes from an Islamic, or as is sometimes called, an Islamicate background. In other words, it comes from the Muslim world, although it is not specifically a branch of Islam. And I think that perhaps the reasons why I have that close affinity with both these Indian religions, traditional Indian religions of Hinduism and Sikhism, as well as with the more Islamicate religions, including the Baha'i faith, as well as my interest in Sufism, may be because of the influence of Ḥaḍrat Sulṭān Bāhū on my life, throughout my entire life. I'm going to read now a portion from a book called My Contact Emancipation, and I will include a link to this book on this same page right below the program. Throughout my life, I have been passionate about both Islamicate, or Islamically contextualized thought, and Indian traditions, including Hinduism, Sikhism, and Surat Shabd Yoga. Following a meditative session on August 17th, 2013, I realized that my lifelong interconnection with dear Bāhū might have sparked these twofold interests. My development of Sufi information central and heartfulness inquiry are two further illustrations. I will also include links to those sites below the program. Another is my love for British philosopher Roy Bhaskar's latest version of his critical realism, which has been substantially influenced by a journey toward rediscovering his own Hindu heritage, the philosophy of meta-reality. I will close now by reading a few brief excerpts from texts dealing with the Bhakti-Ṣūfī movement. The first is from Lakshmi Tiwari. India saw a remarkable fusion of Islamic and indigenous Hindu traditions, giving rise to a rich composite culture. One of the best representatives of this confluence of traditions is the Bhakti-Ṣūfī movement, a form of personal piety that challenged the hegemony of the religious orthodoxy and crusaded against caste and community divisions and meaningless ritualism. A wealth of literature abounds with the teachings and writings of these Hindu and Sufi mystics. This next quotation is from a fellow named K. Sachidanand from a book called Belonging. The Bhakti-Ṣūfī movement was a major pan-Indian articulation of subaltern descent, subaltern meaning challenging hegemony, oppression, or domination. Continuing, the spokesmen/women of the movement mostly came from the subaltern or marginalized sections of society and were workers, women, or Muslims. Sultan Bāhū and other Sufi poets were Muslims by birth. Finally, this is from an introduction to the book, Medieval Indian Literature, an Anthology. Caste distinctions had been deeply entrenched in the Indian psyche. One could perhaps argue that without the Bhakti-Ṣūfī movement, things would have been far worse. Until next time, this is Dr. Mark Foster. Have a good one.